Greetings and welcome to another episode of Q Points. I'm DJ Sir Daniel.
And my name is Jay Ray, sometimes known by my government as Johnny Ray Cornegay III. How you doing, Sir Daniel?
I'm fantastic. Happy to be doing another episode of Q Points podcast, dropping the needle on Black music history. Now, Jay Ray, we've been dancing around this subject for a minute now, and we discovered a young man by the name of Calvin Michaels, and he is a musician in his own right, and has a very interesting story of his own. So we were like, let's just kill two birds with one stone and just chat with Calvin and see if he could help the uncles out, the OGs out with any information. But Jerry, let's introduce our guest to the audience.
Absolutely, y'all. We are so excited to welcome Calvin Michaels to Q Points. Calvin, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Hey guys, what's today? Wednesday? Happy Wednesday.
Right.
It's a blur. It's a complete blur.
We all just making it, right?
We are.
Absolutely. Calvin, you're tuning in, or beaming in, I should say, from Chocolate City itself, Washington, D.C. And as far as music is concerned, I just saw something recently that was talking about go-go. I think it's something that came up on my social media feed about the power of go-go and how, of course, we know go-go is very germane to Washington, D.C. But tell us about what influence D.C. has on you as a musician and your artistry.
I'll definitely say, especially when it comes to go-go, you really have to be at a live go-go to really get it. Because I'm originally from the other Washington, like Washington State. My parents were military, so we bounced and moved around, but I moved here for college and just never left.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was first hearing like what go-go was from Washington State, I was being told, oh, just think of like the Rich Harrison stuff that he does with Beyonce and A-Marie. So I was like, oh, okay, all right. I'm thinking, okay, I'm gonna go to DC. It's gonna be 21 things on the radio. And then when I got here, I remember we were at a club and then they started playing like these different tracks. And at first, I couldn't quite gather what I was experiencing. It wasn't bad or anything. It was just so different. Right? Give it 2-3 weeks later. Oh, I was in there and probably knew every word of every song. I think what it is go-go just there's this richness and this raw essence to it, where it really is what I say a genre that has never been watered down. It's still in its original element. And even though it's kind of evolved into different forms, because you have kind of like your pocket go-go, you have you have these different versions where there's some that's a bit more energetic, some that's real smooth and subtle, but there's just, when I say it's just an unapologetically Black genre, and it's so representative of not only just the Washington, D.C. area, but just culture here, where we are collectively in whatever times are taking place in the United States politically, or it's a reflection of all of that. So as far as it correlating to my sound, what I've always appreciated about go-go is that it doesn't matter how old the song is. None of the songs ever sound old because it's all live instrumentation. And I've noticed with music, songs that are recorded with live instrumentation versus samples in studio never sound old. So if you take like a brand new Heavies, Never Stop, which is from 30 plus years ago, it will always sound fresh, no matter how many times you put it on. That's go-go, I think. And I always tell people, you really won't get it until you're there and hear it in person, because it's a different kind of energy. It's something that I don't think you can translate the same way through speakers, but when you're at one and you just feel it, and the people that are around, it's dope. Like even the church I go to is a go-go church. Like the song's got to be. I want some gospel go-go. You don't sing it right. Sing it in the pocket.
Right.
I need that in my veins right now. A little praise and worship with a pocket. Oh, come on, tell us more.
It's great. It's awesome. So,
wow. So to that point, so Calvin, you are a musician. You do so many things. True definition, multi-hyphenate. You're dancing, you're singing, podcasting, commentary, all of those things, right? One, how how did this start for you? Like, what was your entry point into kind of your artistic journey? I'm really curious about that. And when you think about your artistry and what you do, like, what do you want to leave on the world? Like, so how did you enter and what do you want people to get from it?
Yeah, so like I was saying, because my parents were military, we moved a few times, and
Mm,
there was a portion when I turned 8 where we moved to Vicenza, Italy, which was
mm,
cool. However, this is the 90s. This is like 96, 97. So with that, at the time, there was no cable on the
yeah.
military
Mm.
base. You had one channel called AFN to watch, and AFN was American Forces Networks, and that was kind of like they just took the best of what was on all the major networks, and that was your entertainment. So we didn't really watch TV because it just wasn't a whole lot to choose from. So
Yeah.
you were outside, you found creative things to do. So as far as how I guess I got in it, probably would have been through dance first. This lady had just come from America,
Mm-hmm.
and she had Janet's Velvet Rope DVD that she, or not even DVD. I'm jumping the gun here. VHS that
Yeah.
she recorded
Come
off the
on.
TV when it aired.
Yes.
Um, and I saw, and mind you, I hadn't really seen, at this point, it's like 98. I haven't really
Yeah.
seen music for 2 years. I've heard it, some of the big songs in the US would cross over and find its way to Europe. But a lot of what was happening in America, I was out of the loop on. I didn't know who was doing what. My
Mm-hmm.
brain was calibrated in 96. So that I saw that concert. And other than I think Whitney's Welcome Home Heroes
Mm-hmm.
concert from like
Great
91,
show.
that was the only concert I remember ever seeing. So when I saw that, hooked, let me emulate everything I see. And then somebody else ended up having Michael Jackson's history, what
Mm-hmm.
one of them showed. So I used to watch that in Velvet Rope just all the time and kind of just started teaching myself to kind of dance. And then when we
Yeah.
moved back to America, we moved to another small town called Spanaway, Washington.
Okay.
Not a whole lot to do. You have nothing to do but be creative. So I mean, it's kind of, I feel like everything kind of happened at the same time. I was also, a kid that grew up in the church, so you had to be in the choir, and we
Mm-hmm.
went to a storefront church, so everybody participates. You gonna, I was usher, choir, and eventually choir director. And if they do the Easter play and the Christmas program, you got to be in that too, right? So then you're doing theater, and then I kind of jumped into theater in middle and high school. I was on like the actual dance teams in high school. But as far as
Yeah.
the YouTube channel, as far as me getting a presence, I used to teach dance on the side.
Mm-hmm.
And so by the time I got to Howard, I had these different contracts with a bunch of different teams. And then I got
Mm-hmm.
into Howard and I needed to move to DC, but I wasn't done with the teams and I'd already signed contracts. So what ended up happening is we came to like a medium because I couldn't keep flying each weekend to
Right.
teach. I would do the lessons on YouTube with an
Ooh.
unlisted link and just send my lessons in the choreography and
Yeah.
to these different teams. And then, I'd fly special occasion when it was competition time. And so that's how the YouTube channel initially started. So people sometimes will see my channel and be like, oh, he started in '05. He's old
Mm-hmm.
as I was like, no, I didn't start like the YouTubing for like another handful of years. So it started with that. After college, I graduated at the peak of the recession, so there were
Mm-hmm.
no jobs. I went right back home, bored to death, and somehow I just randomly was like, I think I'm gonna do a comedy show. And so I randomly went and did a comedy show, and it went really well. And then I did like another and another. I was like, actually, okay. So then I started using the YouTube channel to promote my comedy shows. I would, showcase that.
Mm-hmm.
That's all like 2010,
Wow.
2011. Fast forward, there's this lady named Bethany Storrow,
Mm-hmm.
who lived in Vancouver, Washington, which is a town where there's probably about three of us over there.
Right.
And long story short, she claimed that she had been attacked by this black woman who threw acid on her face. And she was on the news, whole face green, skin burned off,
Mm-hmm.
everything. Turned out she made it all up. And it was because she was trying to get the attention of her ex-boyfriend. And so she
Wow.
needed a tragedy. I'm like, well, why you got to put us in it? So
Right. Like, how
that
we
is
get in it?
yeah, so that kind of
Wow.
pulled me into now I got something I want to say. And that's when I started actually making the YouTube videos and talking.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that for some years. Then I started just jumping into new projects. I did a web series called Generation Black maybe 10
Mm-hmm.
years ago. We did that. Um,
Wow.
how we got into the music. Oh yeah. I had already been meaning to build a recording studio. I've always done music anyway. I've always had like a keyboard or something, but I just wanted
Mm-hmm.
to do it more officially. And then I always remember speaking of Janet, I had tickets to the Unbreakable tour, and
Yep.
then that's the one that got postponed because she was pregnant.
Yep.
And so the money I had from the refund from that tour plus my tax refund, I was like, I have enough to build a studio. And so I just went to Guitar Center. I was like, hey, I want to build a studio. What do I need?
Dope.
And then we kind of played around. And Before you know it, I had an album and then another album, and in between the two albums came the Comedically Hard-Headed podcast.
Yep.
Because the YouTube channel was very political,
Mm-hmm.
and people were like, "You're funny, but you scare us." And I'm like, "I'm scaring y'all." What? So that was the podcast. I was like, okay. So then we launched or I'm saying we like there's somebody else here, but
Mm-hmm.
I
Yes.
launched the Comedically Hard-Headed podcast, which was like a storytelling
Yeah.
podcast. So that's
Yep.
all humor. We ain't cussing nobody out. It's just all good laughs. I'm trying to wrap this up because I'll talk in circles. And then from there, it's really kind of just built and branded. We ended up doing a short film because somebody found one of the episodes and thought it was hilarious. We just did the film festival circuit last year
Dope.
with one of the episodes from that. And so that's been that. But getting to the question about, I guess, impact or what legacy I would like to make,
Mm-hmm.
I just want to live in my purpose, right? And I think our purpose, we have that North Star,
Yes.
but there are different ways to get there. So at this point, I'm taking 15 different routes just to get to that star. So some days it's music, some days it's comedy, some days it's the podcast, other days it's a deep dive, and I want to talk about, I don't know, Motown records or something. So that's kind of where it's all at. So I do a little bit of everything, but you try to find ways to balance it out so you're not, overworked and burnt out and tired.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow.
So Calvin, that's a lot of living packed into your lifetime.
Yeah, I'm
And
old.
no, we're older than you, trust me.
Yes.
And that's why I find this so fascinating to talk to you as somebody who is well traveled and who has lived in various parts of the world. When you come back home and you're an artist yourself, you sing, you dance, tell jokes, all the whole nine. When you encounter the factory that is, and it's a factory. When you encounter the factory that we here in America know as K-pop, initially, what is your response? Initially, you're like, so we're not strangers to the boy band formula here in the States, especially.
I loved Menudo.
Right. Especially, but then when we came to the late 90s, we had the 98 Degrees, the NSYNCs, the Backstreet, all of those boy groups and the girl groups being manufactured like by one or two people in the industry. So when you encounter it as somebody looking from your lens, as somebody who's lived here in the States but also lived abroad, what is your initial reaction to the whole American bandstand of it all, like of K-pop and how everything is manufactured? Like, what was your initial reaction when you started seeing them?
So the first time I remember seeing any K-pop anything would have been the early 2000s. So living back in Washington State, there's a really large Southeast Asian population and Pacific Islander population, really huge. And so there were additional channels that were tailored to those demographics. And so I remember one time, like my best friend at the time, we were music dorks. We would just sit on the phone and talk music all day to the point where other people would be like, yeah, y'all are weird. Why are y'all talking about somebody? You naming all the band members from some random tour that none of us heard of. But anyway, so we would sometimes
it does. It's how cute
we would sometimes just be on the phone and like I'm sure y'all did this too back in the day. Like you and your friend would watch the same show on TV.
Oh, yeah.
So we were like flipping channels one day, and it ended up on one of these like local access Asian channels, and they had a segment where they played music videos. This is about 03, 04. And so I remember we were watching, and I remember the first video I saw, it was by this artist named Lexi. I think it's Lexy, and she had a song called Girls. And when I looked at her, I was like, this looks so much like Janet's All Night Don't Stop video, like similar style, similar lighting. Everything. I was like, okay, interesting. And then like the next video that played was this lady named like Lee Roy, and she had this song called 110 Minute. And she has the same jersey dress that Maya has on in the Best of Me remix video with Jay-Z. Like, what's going on here? And we were intrigued though. I'm not gonna lie, like it was interesting because it's like we're only teenagers, but you could still tell, like, okay, this is really like an emulation here. And so I don't remember the name of the show, but it came on once a week, and we used to just sit and watch to see all these videos. And every video that came out, it was interesting because it was almost like the imaging they had was maybe a few years behind what we were doing at the moment. Production wise, I take that back. The imaging was matching up, but the production was a few years behind. It sounded like, maybe 2000, not 2004, 2005ish. And so we were just like, okay. Now I will say, in comparison to the now, I think what they were doing then was a bit more well-rounded than now. I think right now you really do see the evidence of that kind of factory, that kind of just throw it all out there. I felt like those artists that were out in those earlier years. I think there's one like the Utada. There was, I think, a guy named Bi. There was, um, I'm skipping so many people. I'm forgetting these names, but they all had their own kind of personalities. What I'm noticing about this current era is I can't tell who's who, and that's not to sound like ignorant, but as far as just the distinction between their sound, even the imaging in their music videos, the music production, the choreography, it's like everybody has exactly the same package presentation. I mean, it's cool visually, I guess, but it's not. To me, it just feels too calculated and too orchestrated and too mechanical. I think, and that's just because I'm a little older than the target audience, and I do remember when K-pop was not a thing in the United States, to the extent that it is now. Something has just always felt off, and I just always think to, I want to say this is the 2018 or 2019 Billboard Music Awards. And New Edition and New Kids on the Block had a joint performance. And I remember them panning to BTS, the big boy band that was really, really big. You've seen their videos. They just,
Right.
But what was so interesting is when they were doing Bobby's Every Little Step I Take in the segment, I noticed BTS was dancing, but they weren't on the rhythm to the song. And I was like, wait a minute. Now y'all can do all this choreography and spin on your head, but y'all can't catch the two and the four. I was so confused, and then I realized, well, that's because this is not what they're rooted in. This is something. There's a conversation of skilled versus trained, right?
Yes.
And so I was like, okay, this makes sense. This is why, like, yeah, they can emulate, but you can tell that a lot of times it's not really what they're rooted in. Now it's made a lot of money. It's, I mean, these are acts that are selling out stadiums in the U.S. at this point now.
Yep.
But I think there's a specific demographic that appreciates it, and that they're able to market to. But I think there's another segment that is just never going to be into it, and that's kind of where I think a lot of, I'll throw myself in there, to be honest. It's cool. It's not my bread and butter to run behind. And I don't think they have that full identity of what they want to be artistically. It's more so the marketing and the branding. They have that mastered, but the authenticity and the artistry, I don't think is there, which is why you see so many of these acts just blow up and then disappear. And what makes it even crazier now that I think back at it, one of the things I remember when we saw those early versions, and mind you, K-pop was already out by the time I discovered it. It had been a thing since about the mid 90s, and I'm 10 years late, right? I specifically remember that Lee Roy, just 1 10-minute video. Y'all please go watch that when you get a chance. But there's a scene where they're riding with the top down in, I guess, what was the Korean hood. And then they pan to all the Korean dudes playing basketball. And we were like, what?
Now wait a minute. Now wait a minute.
And this one we were still wearing the visors. It was like 20 Allen Iversons in the video, but they were just Korean. I said, this is, you could tell that, okay, they're trying to piece a certain image here. Because what part of Korea is this?
Right.
I mean, you would have, the way that it was presented was like, oh, okay, so y'all in Brooklyn, really? Okay, all right, okay. So it's and I get it, because again, Black music influences everybody, and our music is really huge there. Some of our artists are huge in places like Japan and Korea and Singapore. So it's no secret that the influence is there. But it goes back to what I was saying about the idea of rooted. So even if you're talking Korean music or K-pop, their bread and butter before K-pop blew up was Korean folk, which is so left field from what is currently out there. So again, it's almost like that foundation was never there, but they built their foundation off of what was happening in the US in the 80s and the 90s. And so that's where their foundation stops. But if you're talking about like an R&B artist in the United States, even an R&B artist they may be born in 2000, even their foundation doesn't stop in the 80s, because you know what, even though on Sundays if they had to go to grandma's house, grandma was playing 70s and the 60s or wherever. And so there's still that
Exactly.
element of, you know, certain elements of sound being rooted, or even if they were a family that went to church, those same music theory lessons that
Mhm.
we indirectly get if you grew up in a church have never really changed. The only difference is now they got a guitar and it's a little bit more praise and worship-ish versus maybe what we grew up on with the choirs. But
Mhm.
Hmm.
there's still that essence of that foundation that's still there. And I don't think the K-pop acts really have that, and all they can do is emulate. And I think this is why you're seeing so many cycle in and cycle out. Because just 10 years ago, the 2NE1 group, that was the 2NE and the number one, or maybe they're called
Mhm.
21, with a massive, massive act. Like they were before
Never
BTS,
even heard. That's
right?
crazy because I never even heard of
They were
them.
huge, and yeah, they were mad. And some of it was I used to work with kids, so
Mhm.
they're a bit more on the internet than I am, so
Yeah.
they were finding everything. But I remember they were massive at a point, and then it's like they just fell off the face of the earth. I'm like, where'd they go? And now there's kind of like Blackpink, which is one that's kind of caught on here. They've done Coachella,
Yes.
and there's some acts, and I'm really not trying to whack any of these acts. It's
Mm-mm.
just I think it's a generational thing. I think if you're of a certain age, you're just never going to be 100% into it. There will be the anomalies, but overall, I just think if you were rooted in an era where, Michael, Prince, Whitney,
Mhm.
Janet, Mariah were on your TV, and I'll even throw Madonna in there, were on your TV, it's really hard to be impressed by, yeah, that's just where I'm at.
So that so that kind of it kind of quells the fire that I had initially when we had the initial conversation.
Mhm.
This kind of dulls that a little bit. It's like, oh, okay, they're really all it's really about consumption
Mm-hmm.
and then just regurgitating what you've
Mhm.
consumed. Because, like you said, there's been years I've seen this guy who does nothing but New Jack Swing choreography, and he dances to, I think, any New Jack Swing song that you could ever think of that was made between 87 and 95. He's
Mm-hmm.
danced to it, and they specifically love that particular era. They have this thing for New Jack Swing. But then I also think about how we, specifically Black people, are viewed in different cultures. And as you're a world traveler,
Mhm.
um, is this modern blackface? Is
Mm.
it is there like a teaspoon of racism in
Mhm.
there? Because we've all seen the pictures of the kids, and it's definitely tied to youth culture. The kids that are getting their hair twisted into bantu knots
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
and trying to create waves out of their hair. And
Mhm.
as you said, the fashions are very early 2000s with the throwbacks and the throwback skirts and all that other stuff, and they're getting their hair cornrowed and all these kinds of things. So, but is there an actual, and you can't speak for them, but as somebody who's traveled and has experienced different cultures, as a Black person presenting in this world, is it rooted in is it rooted in appropriation? Is it making fun of? Is it adoration? How do you feel about it?
I always say, just imagine you travel there and you walk into a room and you see 15 people with the outfits and the hair and the jewelry staring at you like you're crazy. How do you feel in that moment? Do you feel
Okay.
like what, I think it's a combination of all of it, to be
Mhm.
honest. I
Hmm.
really do believe that community adores what we do. I mean, because honestly, I think R&B, hip hop, New Jack Swing, for a lot of them, that was their introduction to what you would call like Western style music, as opposed to like the Korean folk. So it's, that's their introduction to certain things. And I think
Mhm.
culturally, we've always been emulated. But I think where there's a gray area is there is still that element of racism that is there. And
Mhm.
some of these fan bases are crazy. I just see it on social media because a lot of them don't want to acknowledge that the entire origin and influence of of K-pop comes from what Black artists were doing. That's the main reason why
Yep.
in my New Jack Swing deep dive I
Yep.
opened with that,
Yep.
which I got cussed out for because the Teddy Riley disciples didn't know where I was going with it. I'm like, just keep watching.
Just
It's gonna
keep
cut.
watching. They
They
have to
like, what
keep
you
watching
started in
it, y'all.
Korea for?
Go.
I was like, just. It's. I summed it up in
Teddy
4
Riley
minutes. Just give me
disciples
4
is
minutes to get
crazy.
it out. Like, oh man, they were whacking me. I'm like, y'all,
You like,
it's
just
going
keep
somewhere.
going. Like, we were
Lord,
impressed. That's how we got here. We're like, no. Yes, Calvin Michaels.
they were killing me. Let me turn this light on. It's getting dim in
Okay.
here.
Rutabaga. All right.
Okay. Yeah, the sun's trying to set on here. But anyway, so yeah, and so I think I see some element of like, to me, there's some element of racism because there's a lot of anti-blackness in that region of the world as well,
Mhm.
right? And even when it comes to certain things like the N-word,
Mhm.
some of them have no problem using it, and some of it is there's not a full understanding of the black plight in the United States, but some do understand it and just don't care.
Mhm.
And so I think it's a weird space because also we now have Black American producers that are also making their sound. So you have people like Sean
Which-
Garrett and Teddy Riley who, you know, give some of them
Yeah.
their hits too. And I get it. There's money to be made. And I think with K-pop, for me, I see it as a brand and a business model more so than like a specific genre of music that's rooted in something. If you notice the rollouts, it's centered all in branding and how can we get the most commercial gain. Um, and I think that stems from like what you brought up earlier when we talked about the boy bands. One of the things that was interesting about living in Italy is, you know, we got the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC early. Backstreet Boys was out, I don't want to say, by the time I got to Italy, they were already a thing overseas. NSYNC as well. And so I remember moving back to the US in 99, and now NSYNC is promoting like Tearing Up My Heart. And I'm like,
Right.
this was almost 2 years ago. Y'all just now getting this?
Right.
Right? Because they were some of the acts that actually were marketed specifically in Germany, blew up in Germany. Germany is only a country and a half away from Italy. You just go through Switzerland and then we right there. And so that model of set them up in Europe,
Yep.
model them after Boys to Men, model them after New Edition, teach them how to dance, give them a little bit of extra swag. You know, you're gonna get Chris from NSYNC, who at the time, remember he used to have them
He
braids.
used to have the braids
He
too.
have
Yep.
it
Had
too.
them braids, put them out there, and you get like an
Mhm.
AJ from Backstreet Boys who has. He doesn't have an ambiguous look, but you can tell he got something else in the bloodline. So
Right.
kind of make him look like he's a little bit more spicy than usual, and then put them out there. And now
Spicy
they got
white,
some
as they
eight
call
counts
it.
down, and now we can package them and give them to the United States. Like I think
Yes.
that's almost where the difference is with the boy bands versus like the Spice Girls, who I think the Spice Girls kind of stayed in a super
Yep.
bubblegum pop realm, but I think the boy bands, there was an effort to really model them after what the R&B groups were doing at the time. Like Spice Girls, I think was still, you know, they were still a great group, but I didn't see them marketed as, you know, put them in a room and make them do what En Vogue and TLC are doing. I think Spice Girls somehow were able to kind of carve their own lane, even though the influences are there. I never saw them as carbon copies of, and I'm not saying that about NSYNC Backstreet Boys, but I never saw them as they were still a factory group. They were
Yeah.
assembled clearly, but I think there was a different origin behind their creation, where you had Lou Pearlman who knew exactly what he was doing.
Absolutely.
Because and even the ties to the guy with New
Maurice
Edition,
Starr.
Maurice
Maurice
Starr,
Starr.
the connection with him and Lou Pearlman, like so there was an effort. Yeah, so I think when you jump back to the K-pop conversation, it's the same thing, but the only difference is now we just also there's the language barrier because a lot of these artists don't speak English either.
Right.
They sing
Not a
in English,
piece.
they
Not-
don't speak, or they have a very limited
Right.
scope. Or sometimes you'll see these groups that win the award, they'll have the member that speaks it a little bit better that will do all the talking. And then it's interesting because then when you listen to the lyrics and they're talking about I'm so bad, I'm so hood, like where?
Like who?
Okay,
Who?
okay,
And
so
how? Right.
Right.
You're just singing
Yeah.
things. You know what this is bringing up for me, and this makes me mad. But we do this every time. It is the incessant commercialization of our culture. Like we saw this in the late 80s where all of a sudden all the black producers was producing on all these white groups, right? And giving them bops, right? We got so many bops in the New Jack Swing era.
because Jane
From-
Child.
Baby, that is
Don't
a
Wanna
jam
Fall in Love is a-
all day. We talk about that is a jam. Tara
That's
Kemp's
still-
Just
we
Want to Hold
playing
You
it,
Tight
yeah.
all day. These are jams, right? But it's just this this connection to commercialization that will have some of us being like, you know what? No, I can absolutely have my song on this group, right? This group who has no connection to your history, no real interest in understanding what it means to be rooted in it, singing over your stuff. And that it's business 101, it's music industry 101. I get it, but it happens all the time, and I still get mad because it waters everything down. And what happens is then we have to do that so that then we can then sell it back to our folks. So these folks took our thing, made it this, then we have to do that, right? Put our stank back on it, give it back. But of course, we're going to do it differently because we done put our stank on it. They're going to be like, okay, that now. Okay, do what they're doing. And then it's like this cycle. And I'm just like, I want it to stop. Stop giving these people you know what? I ain't getting in nobody's pockets. If you're going to sell your stuff, do your thing, but it makes me mad. J. Ray be mad.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of that. I also do think some of it is the labels as well.
Of course.
And I think for producers that are trying to get on, they want the placement. So
they want the placement.
Especially the ones that are hungry and they just need that foot in the door.
Yep.
It's
real.
It's music business, unfortunately. That's the business part. But I do think that is one of the reasons why R&B music commercially is where it's at now, because of 20 years of that, where especially our pop artists went a whole lot more R&B rooted.
Yep.
Urban influence. I don't like the word urban, but that's what they call us.
That's what they
once we got to the late 90s. Because I always tell people, they always think I'm crazy, but when Britney Spears came out, I thought she was black because I didn't see the music video.
Hit Me Baby One More Time was a whole...
It came on the radio. The Italian station was called Disco Palladio. And like I said, we didn't have access to music videos. There was no MTV or nothing. And so if you're thinking about white girls in pop, pre-96, let's just say about 90 to 96. The only main pop act that was a woman that was really doing it was Madonna. And even then, she was at a slowdown at that point temporarily. And she gave us bedtime stories and erotica. So she was kind of in a different realm. But when you thought of white women in music, you know, it's kind of like a Leanne Rimes kind of sound. There wasn't really this quote. I guess whatever group Fergie was in it, when they tried so hard and it never grew up.
Oh, Wild Orchid.
Wild Orchid. And
all these crazy runs.
Nobody took it, not to whack them, but no, folks like, okay, y'all got a lot. But when it came to white girls, there was no association with like super funky, swagged out music. Not since probably Tina Marie. And she was always more R&B rooted and was never really seen as
she was doing black music, period.
When she passed, white people didn't know who she was. Right. So when Baby One More Time came on, I was like, what is this? And so I remember getting back to America. And by then, Sometimes was out. Yeah, Sometimes was out. And I'm like, I think this is that one girl. But remember the Now music compilations? Like
Now that's what
when I got to America, it was Now 2. And Baby One More Time was in the Now 2 commercial. And that's when I first saw her. And I saw this white girl with pictures. I was like, what is going on here? Like, because, and then I was in denial. And I remember seeing her album cover. And, you know, she has the tan. So I was like,
yes.
She could be like a Mariah kind of. I was trying so hard for her to be black.
You were trying to make fetch happen.
I was like, I know she got it. There's no way she's what I think she is, right? And so yeah, but I say all that to say, you know, even when you talk about those pop acts, look at how much more R&B rooted they became in the later years. Like Backstreet Boys started getting used songs like The Call with the Neptunes remix. Christina went dirty, and she had the song with Lil' Kim, and NSYNC had Gone, and which was on 106 in Park all day, and Girlfriend. And then that question becomes, well, where did the R&B acts go? Because now the labels are like, well, we could, you know, push Tamia, but we got Christina that can do this.
So you were absolutely right. Listen, I think Calvin is like, Calvin is definitely part of the Q Points.
Yes.
Q Points family. There's a huge resemblance here in what we've been discovering and talking about on our show as well. And just, I don't know, I think the conversation then, or it's not even a conversation for us, but for the general public here in the United States. But as people who live in this country who who are Black men, who are who consume music, we just have these questions. And I'm grateful to have somebody with another perspective to come by and kind of like, well, this is what, and kind of teach us what happened. So I appreciate you, Calvin, for joining
No
us
problem.
on this episode and kind of enlightening us as to what happens. Because again, in all of our discussions and all of our discovery, capitalism is really what's at work here. You have artistry and you have capitalism, and therein the two shall meet or not meet. Artistry and capitalism tends to win out over everything. Cash rules everything around us, basically.
Absolutely.
And so,
Yeah.
before we wrap up, Calvin, do you have any final words, or please let our audience know about your channel and how they can find you so that they can be in tune for your next deep dive conversations around the early 2000s, as you alluded to?
Yeah, and also real quick, Calvin, too, you released 2 records recently. So before tomorrow and after yesterday, definitely let our folks know about your music too, where they can tune into you.
Yeah, look, after I spent 30 minutes whacking all these artists, now I gotta promote my stuff. Yeah, check me out, y'all. They about this big old hater on here. But I was also gonna say too, to your point with the capitalism, that was the one part I forgot to add in with K-pop, is that a lot of the acts that we see commercially, they've been in these almost K-pop boot camps since they were young teenagers, where it's pretty much for years they go away and they go into these extensive dance courses, these extensive singing trainings and everything else like that. I only made that face because by the time I hear them, everything is going through so much EQ and
Right.
you don't know what
Yes.
the voices
You
sound
don't know
like.
what's
But yeah, there's no distinction. But
And
yeah, they
extensive
spend
contracts
years.
too.
These crazy contracts, they don't really make a lot of money. It's making everybody else
That's
money.
money.
And so yeah, they do all that, and it's centered again around the conversation of branding and commercialism, making you the most perfect polished act that can be presented globally when it's time for you to make your arrival. So there's that. But yeah, as far as I forgot where I was going with this. Oh, my stuff. Yeah, you can check out my website, calvinmichaels.com, that has everything from my music to my podcast, YouTube channel. I have a book club, whatever's happening with my film projects. As far as my music, I released my third and my fourth album a few months back, which again, before tomorrow, after yesterday. It was supposed to be one album, but I realized the songs weren't complementing, and I was like, these belong on 2 separate projects.
Yeah, because
And
one
so,
is
yeah,
like the slow, like more of
it's a
the love
mid-tempo
slow jam,
R&B.
and one is the up tempo. Yeah.
Other one, yeah, you want to go spin in your head. That's the other one. So, yeah, and yeah, all my stuff is self-produced, and I sit right in my living room, pissed off my neighbors, cranking all night, all day. You got to hear you make a few attempts for certain notes that you're trying to see if you still have or not. And so, yeah, all of that's there. I also, my end goal is more so to make music for other artists. I like making my own, but I really would like to start pushing in that direction and getting placements with other artists. So that's kind of my bailiwick. And so yeah, the albums are out. I also have 2 other albums, Symphonic Euphoria and the hardcover.
Cool.
One's from 2017, one's from 2019. I took like a 5-year break before I came back out musically. So yeah, so just check it out if you're into it. If you're not, okay. So,
Well,
yeah.
there's so many entry points, and thank you so much once again. I want to echo everything Sir Daniel said. Like, you're definitely one of those folks, true multi-hyphenate, right? Like, there are so many entry points where folks can just grab you. If they want the commentary, which y'all should check out, definitely go check out Calvin's YouTube channel. You get a lot, so you get the music, but you also get the commentary. But then there's all these other things. Like I said, I had the opportunity to listen to the podcast, so you get like the storytelling, the comedy. There's of course the music, all of these pieces. So you give the folks, there's a way for folks to engage with Calvin Michaels, the brand, and you see this knowledge that Calvin is dropping. So just thank you so much for taking the
thanks
time
for having
out.
me.
You're very, very welcome. And so for all of you that are tuning in, thank you all so much for tuning into this episode. If you can see our faces and hear our voices, subscribe wherever you are. Make sure that you go over to Calvin Michaels and subscribe to Calvin Michaels as well. You can visit the Q Points website at qpoints.com, where you can see the archive of all of our episodes. You can also visit our magazine, Q Points Mag, where you can check out some additional content that supplement some of the shows or complement some of the shows. So definitely check that out, and definitely shop our store too at store.qpoints.com. We appreciate y'all. We love y'all.
Absolutely. Another one. J. Ray, what do I always say at the end of every episode? In this life, you have a choice. You can either pick up the needle or you can let the record play. I'm DJ Sir Daniel.
My name is J. Ray, y'all. That's Calvin Michaels.
And this has been Q Points Podcast, dropping the needle on Black music history. We'll see you on the next go round. Peace.
Peace, y'all.